need to do. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on this nice Thursday afternoon. If you don't already know, we do have another session coming up. Joseph, is that on the 18th?
Yeah, next Thursday.
So next Thursday, if you want to join that too. Just real quick, I want to do some introductions on the two amazing companies we have presenting to you today. My name is Jamie Williams. I'm with Heiden Technology, but we also have Josef Wainz, or Joe, of TurtleWorks. Now, Josef has over 25 years in the software space. He continues to lead a great team of folks who build systems in many different sectors. They deal manufacturing, finance, logistics, engineering, nonprofit, the list goes on and on. But what Josef is really interested in doing with companies is really leveraging the Microsoft technology to pretty much tailor something, a solution to their needs to help businesses boost their productivity. So Josef is going to go through a really great presentation. He took a lot of time putting this together for you guys. But then on another note, we also have Heiden Technology, and Carl is with us. Now, Heiden Technology is more on the infrastructure side. They do managed services, kind of putting those solutions together also in the same types of sectors, along with a lot of other ones. But Heiden Technology has been in business since 1994. They have a great team of folks over there. And also Carl is going to be put together a nice presentation for you all too on some topics on Office 365. So at the end of this, we will talk about some upcoming topics we want you to choose from on what we're going to talk about next. And we're also going to talk about what we're going to send you after the webinar. If you have any questions please feel free to put them in the Q&A. I'm going to be fielding those questions. So we'll be answering those throughout the webinar. And then if we have any kind of questions lingering, we'll answer all those at the end. So with that, Joe, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Yippee-ki-yay. Let's get this off the ground. And I need to do this. And let's do that. And do this. And see if we get it right. We didn't get it right. All right, bear with me. Two monitors, and I got to get the right monitor. Screen 2. Here we go. Okay. All right. So OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint, how and why to manage files in the cloud. That's what we're talking about today. I'm going to get into the basics like why, talk about document libraries, your options and methods, OneDrive versus Teams versus SharePoint. So we'll get into organization a bit. Then I have some demos that I'll show, and then I'll talk about limits that you need to be aware of when you're doing migrations into the cloud. So why do you want to move your files into the cloud to begin with? Well, there's multiple reasons. Collaboration is a big one. What that means is many people are working on the same files at the same time. So people can chat, they can interact on the files, they can comment on the files, they can refer other people to the files. So that's a big advantage to the cloud. We also, within Teams and SharePoint, we have metadata, we have filters, we have content types, approvals, versions, and history and automation. And I'll touch more on those as I get into the presentation. All of those are just not available if you're on a file server or on the C drive or D drive on your laptop or desktop. You can share files. So sharing files with coworkers isn't that big of a deal. You're used to that, but you can now share files externally with clients, vendors, and others without having to do it as an attachment in an email. So it shrinks the size of your inbox, but it also keeps the version of the file always current. As soon as you attach a file to an email and send it, that file is stale and it's no longer the most up-to-date file. So by sharing files through the cloud, you always have the latest and greatest. And finally, we can sync files with your computer so you can work, even if you're disconnected from the internet for a period of time, like on an airplane, you can make changes. And when you get connected back to the internet, you sync back up. So document library is the common object that's used by OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams for managing the files. Just keep that in mind. That's the tool, the software application that allows us to benefit from the cloud. Here's a screenshot of collaboration. So if you take a look, you'll see I'm logged in over here into this Excel file, and I'm in cell C3. Over here is Susie, and she's logged in as well into the spreadsheet, and she's in cell E7. Well, if you look at what I'm seeing, I can see that Susie is actually in that particular cell. If Susie were to update that value, I would see that update occur. And the same would be true for me. If I updated my value, Susie would see my value. So that's a rich experience that we didn't have a few years ago that we now have when we start putting our files into the cloud. Good example of collaboration. We also have things like content types. So if you're fiddling with Teams or SharePoint or OneDrive these days, you're used to seeing this new menu option, but you normally see document, Excel, maybe notebook, and that's about it, right? If you look here, I've got statement of work, consulting agreement, estimate workbook. If I click on any of those, it will open up my template for my business, and I can start working, and that file is saved in the location that I need it to be saved in automatically. Real-time saver. We also have version history, so we can see here where a particular file has been edited 3 times. So it was initially edited the first time, and in this case, we can see who edited it, what was changed, and status, those kinds of things. So version 1, version 2, 2.1. So again, that's not something you get with a file server. If we needed to, we can go back and look at those previous versions or actually roll back and make that previous version a production version. Metadata. So what that means is on a file, we can attach more information than you're used to. So for example, here's a new dealership agreement. That dealership agreement is worth $8.6 million. It's located in Detroit. We don't have a case number for it yet. It's version 3.1, which means it's a draft. So it hasn't been published. The latest one hasn't been published or made available to the public yet. We can filter and sort very much like Excel. We also have approvals. So you can see over here, we've got pending and rejected, and there's a rich process that we can put in place for approvals. Sharing and syncing, I mentioned that we can now share files externally. So any file that you want to share externally, you just click on, you get, share, and you just type in their email address. Depending on how your system is set up, you can be restricted to just share internally, or you can open it up to share with the outside world. And that's fairly granular, so you can decide what areas get shared publicly and which don't. You get to choose. So here, anyone with this link can edit, but if I want, I could restrict access to just people in TurtleWorks or people who have existing access. I can uncheck this so they can only view it. They can't change it. Put an expiration date on the sharing, so I can say, hey, you have access for 30 days. After that, you no longer get in, or I can put a password on it. So some pretty rich sharing features. We also have synchronization, where I said we can sync our files to the desktop. That's available anywhere you see this little button. You just click on that guy, it'll walk you through the wizard, and away you go. So here's an example of a document library that's been synchronized with actually multiple document libraries that have been synchronized with my laptop. So first you see this kind of node, that's the high level TurtleWorks LLC. And then each of these are document libraries inside of Teams or SharePoint. And if I clicked on accounts receivable, I would see some more subfolders, or I would see invoices that are out there. So this gives you a sense of what that experience is like. Options and methods. So we have 3 different places in the Microsoft Cloud to put files. OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. I'll get into when to use which. We also have multiple ways of migrating our files. So depending on the size of your organization, you're either going to do things manually or you're going to enlist some of the tools that Microsoft makes available or third-party tools. Chances are, if you're that large, then Heiden is going to help you with that migration. If you're smaller and you can do it manually, then TurtleWorks could help you with that kind of migration. So from a manual perspective, we can do it through the browser, through the Teams interface, or if we synchronize to our desktop, we can actually do it that way. And then Microsoft gives us a couple tools. There is a tool for SharePoint. If you are using on-prem SharePoint and you need to move to SharePoint Online, that is something that TurtleWorks does. We are I have a slew of SharePoint consultants, and we do this kind of work regularly. So we could use that tool. We also use ShareGate, which is a third-party tool. AvePoint also has a tool for this. So I mentioned Document Library was that key component underneath OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. So if you look, that's what we're seeing here. This is SharePoint. We click on New, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Here's Teams. We have that new feature as well. And here's OneDrive. And under New, it's identical to what SharePoint shows. So just an example of how they always use document libraries. Teams and SharePoint, as far as files are concerned, is just a different user interface for the same document libraries. So if you look on the left, we're in SharePoint and we can see Acacia track changes in this private folder. Here we're in Teams and we can see that same private folder, Acacia track changes. So Teams and SharePoint, different UI, same document libraries. They're pointing to the same location of files.
Now, Joe, real quick, we have a question on the check files in and out. So the person, Kendra says she's used SharePoint before, but she has to check files in and out. Is there a workaround, or does OneDrive or Teams solve that? She said, I don't want to have to remember to check files in and out. I appreciate it for larger teams, but my smaller team doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, so what Kendra is referring to is with SharePoint, we have a really robust document management system, and we can specify, we can set it up so that the only way you can edit a file is by checking it out. Once you check it out, nobody else can edit that file. They can look at it, but they can't make changes to it. You do your work, and then you check it back in. When you check it back in, you put some comments in there to indicate what kind of changes you made. And once it's checked in, somebody else can check it out. But in those cases, you can't collaborate on the same file. That is just a setting in the document library. So if you go to versioning, in the settings area of a document library, there's a checkbox that you can uncheck so that you aren't required to check out the file and work with the file. So that's how to deal with that. Okay, OneDrive versus Teams versus SharePoint. When do I use which? This was a tough question. Microsoft gave us some confusion a few years ago, and it's only been in the last year or so that it's become very clear. OneDrive is the place you put your personal files. So you think of your documents folder on your laptop, those are the files that you would end up putting in OneDrive. Or if you have a file server, maybe it's an H drive where you keep your personal files, those files would get pushed to OneDrive. If you have files that are, say, department files, files that you need to collaborate on with other people, that's where Teams really shines. Teams shines with collaboration much more than OneDrive and much more than SharePoint. So when we're collaborating on files, we put them into Teams. And when we have files, say ISO documents, if you're ISO certified, QS documents, employee handbook, what's the vacation or the holiday schedule for the company, things that are more formal, structured, controlled, that's where SharePoint really shines. So those are the three locations and why you would use which, when to use which. And you need to be intentional about this. So this slide just backs up what I talked about. Be intentional. So you just heard me say that. I'm going to say it again, and I'll probably say it 5 more times before we're done. So the street view on the left is actually Ghent, Belgium, and the street view on the right is Manhattan. It's much easier to navigate through Manhattan than it is in Ghent. And why is that? They were very intentional in how they laid out the streets in Manhattan compared to Ghent. So this is what you get on the left when you don't really think about where you're going to store your files. Maybe you have that situation today with your file server. This is what you get when you take some time and think through where you're going to put your files. So if you're considering moving to the cloud, now's the time to sit down and figure out where you want to put your files, how to structure it beforehand. Don't let it go organically.
If they're already in the cloud and you know, they haven't done a lot of planning, is it too late, or what would you say to those folks?
It's not too late. So we get asked regularly about that kind of stuff. Like, we started to use Teams and it's kind of got out of control, or we started to use SharePoint and we don't really know what to do with it. So we have starter kits that we sell, or basically it's an engagement with them to work through either implementing their SharePoint or Teams from the get-go, or you've already got it in place and they need some help figuring out how to use it right because they've made a mess. So one of the first things that we do in those starter kits is we do a design, and this slide is actually what one of the designs looks like. So this is how we set up teams from a design perspective. Each of the columns is a team. They're color coded based on how they interact with SharePoint and security. And then within those teams, we have channels, and within those channels, we have applications or tabs. So we lay all that out ahead of time. Once we do that, we review it with the customer. And you know, for you do something like this, please. You know, work through it internally, figure out how you want to structure your teams, how you want to structure the channels within the teams, and you know, have this roadmap ahead of time. And the same is true for SharePoint. Again, we do something like this with people who need help with SharePoint. It's all, again, very intentional. If you look down here, you'll see that this is a Teams site that also connects to Microsoft Teams. So SharePoint has something known as a Teams site, and you can connect those to the teams that are in Microsoft Teams. So again, those document libraries that were shared, that's how that happens.
Well, so, Joe, that kind of goes into, sorry to interrupt, a question perfectly here. So someone asked, if I migrate to SharePoint, I can make all the files accessible in Teams later because it's in the same document library, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. So after we do that sort of high-level design with boxes or organizational charts or whatever, we still need to figure out where are all our files and where are they going. So this is just a simple map I put together to help illustrate that point. So H drive or My Documents or Documents, so either file server or laptop, it's those personal files that you need to move. Those are going to OneDrive, right? Personal files go to OneDrive, so that's what we're doing here. So, and then we get to Teams. So we've got a file server, we've got an M drive where all the departments are. We need to move those. Those are going to Teams, so that's exactly what we're doing. So finance, the budgets, 2021, that's going. Marketing and the webinars, that's going. And then SharePoint, well, we have this ISO document set, a set of ISO documents sitting on our file server. We need to move it to SharePoint. And we create an ISO document center site within SharePoint, and then we move over our policies, procedures, and whatnot. So I can't sing the praises of SharePoint and how it can manage and control documents from this perspective enough. It does a really good job. All right, so some demos. So first, I really wanted to expose you to different ways that you can move files and the different places that you can move files. So OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint, but drag and drop, doing it through File Explorer, uploading it through the UI. So first we're going to migrate some files to OneDrive. So let me bring up this, and let me bring up this, and there we go. All right, give me a second to get everything in place. All right, so on the right is my OneDrive. It's pretty vanilla, and on the left I'm in Documents, and I need to move my research papers and my white papers over. So from a drag and drop perspective, it really is this simple. At this point, both of those directories are moving over. You can see right here that it's uploading 51 items. If I were to drill into here, you can see the files actually coming in. It's that simple, just drag and drop into the browser directly. So that's something to remember, that you can drag files into the browser. You don't need to use this upload button here. You can just drag. Okay, the next example of, whoops.
Real quick, we have a question. Can I access online files through my desktop-based File Explorer?
Yes, and I'm going to show you that.
Okay.
So that was the synchronization, and actually that's the next example. So I'm going to migrate some files from my sudo M drive to Teams, but I've already synchronized with my desktop as far as Teams is concerned. So let's take a look at that. One there, and that one. Okay, so finance department and this guy. Okay, so if we look on the left here, I have this M drive with the departments, and we have finance, and then we have this budgets folder, and there's a couple files in there that are budgets. All right, on the right, I have this projects finance documents, and this is actually a team. You know what? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that. Let me see if I can get there. Teams, and projects, finance. So here's projects, here's the finance department, and if I click here, we're going to see files. And what I did was I clicked this synchronize button, which is how I set up that synchronization between my laptop and how I set up the synchronization between my laptop and Microsoft Teams. So this is actually that team and that files within that team. So for me to move budgets over to here, it's as simple as drag and drop. I'm going to copy. And you can see this guy here is telling me that it's synchronizing. If I drill in, we're going to see these guys catch up, and the arrows turn into green check marks. That means that they're now synchronized. So what's happening on my laptop at this point is the same thing that's happening out in Microsoft Teams. And if I were to jump over to this team and do a refresh, we're going to see budgets now, and we're going to see those files here. So all right, let's get back to the final. Okay, so the final demo that I wanted to do has to do with SharePoint. So I have an ISO document center created in SharePoint, and I need to upload some files to it that are controlled. So let's jump over to there. Let me maximize this. I actually want to go into the document library proper. So we're in SharePoint at this point. If you're not familiar with SharePoint, this is what it looks like. This is that document library. And at this point, my ISO document center has forms and it has policies, but I need to get my procedures in there. So I'm going to upload. I can either upload files, and notice it's plural, so I can select more than one file, or I can bring a whole folder in. Well, I'm going to bring the whole folder in. I'm going to grab my procedures folder. I'm going to click upload and confirm that. And now it takes a minute. If we look over here, it's uploading 16 items. There's my procedures folder. If I drill into that, not sure why it's doing what it's doing. Anyway, if I drill into that, that's really weird. I need to fix that so I can. Come on. No matter what I do, bear with me. I got to get in here. Let's just do this. Come on. There we go. All right. So now that I'm in here, we have a minute to fiddle with metadata, right? So we have all these procedures in there, and we have these metadata columns: location, department, version, approval status. How do we, that gives us more information on these documents so we can filter and sort. So I want to change some of those values. So there's this button here, edit in grid view. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now we can see that I've got a couple locations. So I'm going to select Chicago as a location. I'm going to apply it to these set of files. Then I'm going to come over here, and we're going to deal with facilities for these couple of files. And we're going to deal with finance for these couple of files. Notice how you can pull it down just like in Excel. I can click on almost any cell and edit the value. So I'm done making those changes. I'm going to exit grid view. There's one challenge though. All of these documents are draft, which means the public can't see them. When I say public, I mean the rest of the people in the company can't see them. Only the people who can edit files in this document library can see them, or people who can approve. So we need to actually get these approved. To do that, we select a file, we submit for approval. Now this is very basic approval. We can build workflows, and there's out-of-the-box workflows in SharePoint as well, so that people could get emails that say, hey, we need you to approve this file, and they click on some things in the email and they can approve. So by submitting it for approval, you see the status change to pending, and now the approver has to do is come in here and approve, and they can reject it, send some comments back. I'm just going to approve and click OK. And now you see the versions changed to 1.0 and it's set to approved. So example of metadata in a document library, some examples of approvals and versions, as well as how to migrate your files into OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. There's only one other thing.
We do have a question.
Sure.
So I need to receive large files from clients. Can I send a link to an external person where they're able to easily provide a file to me, or can I share a file easily? Send an external link, send a link to external users. And I think when they say external, they mean outside their organization, Joe.
Sure. So there's two ways you can do that. You can actually share a folder. If you share a folder, so click here, that folder is now available to whomever you shared it with, so they can upload files into it. So very simple way for them to upload files back to you. They've upped the size that SharePoint or Teams will allow, so it's gigabytes at this point. The only consideration is your own bandwidth for uploading. So if you go and upload a 10 gigabyte file, expect that to take a little while to complete. Yeah, but it's very possible to do that. All right, so one other thing, limits. There is a 255 character limit for, it's not file name, it's file name plus path. So you saw we were in the document library and there was all those, I'm drilling into finance and then budget. All of that's considered part of the file name or the path length. You get 255 characters only. If you exceed that, you're going to get into errors. And special characters are encoded. So like if you have a space in a file name, that actually equates to 3 characters because it converts to %20. So consider that when you're doing naming. And then syncing limits. 300,000 is the magic number. You cannot put more than 300,000 documents or files in a document library and synchronize. In general, on your computer, even if you're synchronizing multiple document libraries, if you add all of them up, you can't synchronize more than 300,000 files. So most of us will never hit that limit, but it is a consideration for larger organizations. And then when you're doing that migration, deal with the redundancy. Okay, these are real examples we've dealt with recently. This was what was on their file server: job descriptions, old job descriptions, 2009 job descriptions, residents. So you know what that does to that 255 character path length is it really screws it up. Here's another example. Departments has a subfolder called departments, which has a folder called development, which has a folder called development share. Get rid of the redundancy. So this can be reduced to job descriptions, 2009 residents, and you can fiddle with that space. And in this case, you can abbreviate to DEPTS and get rid of the extra folders. Yeah, anywhere you're repeating a word in your file path, it's like, why are you doing that? You know you're in job descriptions. Why do you have to keep repeating that? So that is it. Like Jamie mentioned, throw some questions in the chat and go ahead, Jamie.
Yep, we have a few more. So Harry asked, if you share a file with someone outside your business, okay, are there controls that make it so that they can't share it with other people?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. So
okay.
you can specify whether they can share it again or not.
Perfect. All right. So if a person doesn't need to migrate all of their files, would you recommend any kind of archiving system, a separate drive, or how would you back up the stuff they don't necessarily want to migrate into a new SharePoint or Teams?
Yeah, so when you're doing a migration, there's 3 areas you end up dealing with. You end up dealing with what gets moved and probably restructured so it's better, what gets archived, and what gets deleted. So the deleted stuff is easy, you just get rid of it. The archived stuff, there's nothing wrong with creating an archive place in Teams or SharePoint and just moving the files there and not worrying about it. Don't even restructure them if you don't want to. You know, but you've got that availability to go look at stuff. As long as you don't run into the file path length issue, that's an easy win. Yeah, so and Carl's going to get into backing up, so I'll let him answer that during his presentation.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Joe. How long would a migration take for a small business? I know that's always subjective, but you know, what is based on your experience with other clients? What would an average look like for a small business?
So it boils down to the factors involved in the migration. So there isn't an answer. I can't say 3 months or 3 days. I can't do it because if you've got 100,000 files and you're really disorganized, that's going to take much longer than if you have 2,000 files and you're really organized. So if you're really organized, the move is easy. If you're really disorganized, now you've got to go through a much more difficult design process, which just takes time. Plus, if you've got 100,000 files, it just takes that much longer to move. So it's really the steps that are involved of the design process, the structuring, doing the mapping. Those steps are if you can look at those and determine how long they're going to take, that's going to give you an idea of what it would take to do a migration. And then, you know, you start the process of moving the files, but that's sort of a click and just sort of let it run in the background experience. But you need to deal with those steps, and it's situational. If you got a lot of files, it's going to take longer. Even if you're a 5-man shop, but you got 100,000 files versus
Mm-hmm.
You've got 50 employees, but you've got 100,000 files. It's just different. So
Okay. Well, one last question. I know we gotta go. So, can you tell us real quick, Joe, what's the biggest mistake you see organizations making when they're doing a migration to the cloud?
you know what? It's the lack of design. It's the organic growth of Teams and SharePoint, and we see it again and again where they just say, "Hey, we've got Teams, have at it," and everybody's in there creating teams
Mm-hmm.
without thinking about what they're creating. So a rule of thumb is you want to have as few teams as possible, and you want to be a member of as few teams as possible. Well, that doesn't happen if everybody's creating teams willy-nilly. Many times we turn off the ability for end users to create teams or SharePoint sites so that it's managed. So that's the biggest mistake is people don't think this through beforehand.
Okay, and real quick, Joe, we got one more question. Is SharePoint included in Microsoft in the Microsoft products, or is it an extra cost?
No, SharePoint Online is this is sweet. So they level the playing field for the smaller businesses. With SharePoint on-prem, which is still a product, we still do consulting in that area. With that product, you're looking at about 10 grand to get started to have a SharePoint site. With Microsoft 365, it's part of most of the licensing packages that are out there. So you get it almost free. It's really, really nice.
All right, so I know Joe talked about a starter kit. We're going to get into more detail on how you can talk to Joe about the starter kit at the end of the presentation, but I know we want to jump in and let Carl start to talk about kind of what Heiden Technology does and most importantly, Office 365.
All right, so let me stop sharing my screen. Take it over. Go, Carl.
All right, everybody see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we sure can.
All right, so essentially what I look at this as, so being an IT provider, I look at it from the file storage and access piece of it, the security, the compliance, and how to best secure the organization, make sure the data is secure, and make sure users have access without being able to give access like Joe had described, creating teams and creating other containers within Microsoft 365. So I'm just going to go over the different terms and technologies based on a lot of feedback I've gotten from customers, a lot of questions I get just being out and about Microsoft 365. And then take a look at the compliance and the security, how to best protect the organization to ensure that, the files are protected and that it's set up appropriately. And then just kind of have a discussion about, what methods work best for you as far as how do you, I get a lot of customers who are like, I have this on-premise file server. How do I take that and I put it into 365? How do I move this information? How do I make it accessible and ensure that I'm secure and that everything's getting backed up? So real brief, I just want to kind of go through the lineage here a little bit. This kind of helps clarify a lot of times when I explain this as far as how we got here from back in the days of just having a physical server in our office and all the computers mapped to it for the information. So, we started off having physical servers or servers, in our businesses. All the computers were mapped via network. We had shared folders for use for the users. It was based on security. If a user had access to a file, if they could read it, if they could edit it, delete it. We mapped those folders to drives on the user's computer. So, you had an iDrive, an O drive, all these types of things, these containers to be able to access this information. Servers became huge footprint. All of a sudden people were buying physical server boxes, putting them into their businesses. Now we had people who had 5, 10, 15, 20 servers at a location. Heat was a big issue. Electricity was a big issue. Backing all those devices up was a big issue. So then virtual servers got introduced about 10 years ago. A virtual server is a server that resides within the physical server. So you can have one physical server in your network, but within that physical server, you can have multiple virtual servers running. So then we started seeing servers that were purpose-based, a print server that managed all your printers on the network, a file server, Active Directory server to manage your users and credentials. Compartmentalizing many of those types of things out. Then came cloud, And cloud is the ambiguous term that everybody uses. There's tons of different cloud. There's a ton of different options out there. And cloud just means you essentially access it through the internet is the best way to describe it, I would say. And then there's SaaS, software as a service. As many of you know, probably in IT, we love acronyms. We love to make acronyms out of everything. So SaaS, if you hear somebody refer to that, it just means software as a service. It means instead of buying traditional box software and taking the disk and installing it in your computer, now you're buying the subscription. So it's a subscription-based service. So like for Office and that, now it's subscription-based versus the box license. You can still get box licenses, but Microsoft is going to go away from that here very soon, and it's going to be strictly subscription-based. So Microsoft or Office 365, I get this a lot. What is the difference between Microsoft 365 and Office 365? Office 365 and Microsoft 365 are the same. Microsoft just decided to change it from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. They incorporated some different products in the Microsoft 365 name, one of which is remote desktop. So if any of you are familiar with terminal services or being able to remote into a server and have a desktop, they now have that feature that you can get as a subscription through Microsoft for a remote desktop. Some other services that kind of go beyond the Word, Excel, PowerPoint publisher, traditional Office Suite apps. There's like Microsoft Forms, which allows you to create like fillable forms, very similar to like a fillable PDF, but it's web-based. Microsoft Yammer, it's a social networking tool. And then there's Microsoft Dynamics 365, which is a product line which is really geared towards those people that use ERP software or CRM, enterprise resource planning, or customer relationship management. So the Microsoft Dynamics 365 incorporates many different packages as far as like there's some accounting out there. There's, like I said, the CRM, the ERP, there's inventory modules, different pieces like that, all of which ties back into Microsoft 365. And as you can imagine, with all these different packages, there's just a ton of options. So you take the core functionality of Office 365, then they have what's called add-ins, where you can actually buy software that kind of meets your business's needs as an add-in to Outlook or to Word or SharePoint or any of the Microsoft packages. So you can mix and match a lot of these different packages. And you can really design a very nice, robust solution for your business. The thing that we often see when I go out and I audit businesses' licenses is it gets out of control. All of a sudden, they're paying for a ton of licensing that they don't need or they're not using. As you can imagine, a subscription-based model, you have to be careful because now your monthly expenses are continuing to creep up. So just being cognizant of those licensing models and how you can kind of control the licensing is very important. It's very important to work with a Microsoft partner to help you control those costs, know the packages and capabilities. We work with Joe, many times. Joe's very good at customizing and building it to make sure that it maximizes what you need and maximizes your investment. One thing that often gets overlooked is security and data integrity with Microsoft 365. Human error is the #1 cause of data loss, okay? So while all these applications interoperate, security is the utmost concern, okay? You should have a partner help you get set up with security. You should have somebody like Joe help plan out the applications, help map out how things are going to work, and then use a partner to kind of help you map out the security to make sure that everything is covered. Because, I hear a lot of concern from people. My data is inside my 4 walls. I know exactly what I've got. I know exactly what I have. I can go put my hand on the server. It's mine. The cost of maintaining that for a lot of different businesses is very expensive. And 365 is a very good model to adopt to. So there's that concern of like, oh my God, I can't lay my hands on that box. And now I'm trusting it out here somewhere in the ether that, my files are secure and everything's taken care of.
Well, real quick, Carl, we do have a question.
Yeah.
Does Microsoft Office, Microsoft 365, does it come with backup? Does it come with any kind of security of my data if within my subscription? Let's say I have an E3 subscription. Would any type of security come with that type of subscription?
So Microsoft on their EULA, on their subscriber base. So Microsoft does not take any responsibility if you get ransomware, malware, viruses, anything that can compromise your data. Essentially, Microsoft takes no responsibility for it. If the app fails, if anything happens, they don't guarantee it. There's versioning, like what Joe had kind of mentioned in his presentation, where you have versions of files. The retention is relatively short, though, for that retention. And Microsoft actually goes and says you should use a third-party application to back up your Office suite or the Microsoft suite. And what we're seeing a lot of times is people are like, oh my God, I use my email for filing. So I'm gonna, as long as my email's covered. And a lot of times the 365 suite gets overlooked. And there's some real nice applications out there that will back up all your users, their OneDrive, their SharePoint, their, all the different places where they store files, as well as their email. And then it gives that versioning, kind of like versioning that Joe was talking about, so that if you did get malware, you can go back to different points to look for a restoration. So if you had a file that got malware, many times we have to go back a series of time to find a good backup to pull data from. So you need something that provides multi-point backup capability. And,
so if I just had the out-of-the-box Office 365, let's say E3 subscription, and one of my employees deleted an entire folder, maybe a finance folder in their inbox, like a subfolder they created. They had a bunch of very important finance emails. They deleted that, but we didn't know they deleted it. We wouldn't be able to recover that if we didn't have some other backup outside of Microsoft, correct, Carl?
Correct. You can back it up, but Microsoft had their backup tool only, the retention's right around 30 days for their backup. And it's very clunky. It's very hard to use. And even us, we have to call Microsoft to get help with it a lot of times because it's very kind of cumbersome. There are some really nice backup solutions out there though that will make it very easy for you to retrieve from a backup to restore your any information that you might have deleted.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
Multi-factor authentication is also a big issue. So what we mean by multi-factor is when you log into 365, you want to make sure that you have what's called like an authenticator app or that, where when you log into 365, it comes up and it says, hey, on your cell phone, it'll say, are you trying to log in to Office 365? You can hit yes, and then it allows you in so that you don't have to worry about passwords getting compromised, your users' passwords getting compromised. You can even spool that into building it into your Active Directory logins for your users. So to give you an example, like for us, all of our software has Active Directory tie-ins. So I log in with my 365, I log in with my Authenticator app once, first thing in the morning, then all my software allows me to log in. So I'm not logging into multiple sites and multiple things throughout the day, having to type my password numerous times. I just do it once through the Authenticator app and once through Active Directory tie-in. Okay?
Wow, Carl, how much time do you think that saves you a day by having something like that?
Oh, a lot. Our core software, our ticketing software, everything all has Active Directory tie-in. Clients love it. We've set up, I can't tell you how many customers with that functionality, and it really saves a lot of time.
I bet.
Then the other piece that you need to be concerned about is on your email security and your end protection software. Just because you're accessing things through the cloud, you want to make sure that your PC security is good and that everything is secure, because you don't want to run into issues with corrupting the cloud by getting a virus on your computer and uploading a file. And then third-party backup, we talked about that for backing up the suite. Just some closing thoughts. 365 is an immensely powerful tool, and it's amazing the functionality and the things that you can do. Planning is everything. Mapping out how you want it to work, how you want it to do things is essential. You have to build that out because we have seen so many poor implementations of 365. We've seen so many instances where employees are accessing payroll information, and we've, just because security wasn't set up appropriate things. So you just want to make sure that you take the extra steps, plan things out, work with a Microsoft partner, make sure you're on the right packages, make sure you eliminate those redundant costs, and make them sit down and talk to you. Look at it from a business perspective. This is a tool. It's a tool to help your business. You don't have to make your business work for the tool. Make the tool work for your business and do what you need it to do.
So, Carl, we have a question.
Sure.
Can you remotely remove someone's access if they have files synced to their desktop or their laptop? Not that they saved it to their desktop, but the files that's actually synced down. Can you remove someone's access to those? Yes,
you can. That's kind of a loaded question. So through OneDrive and through email and through SharePoint Net, it's all tied into their security. So if you remove the security, you remove access to the file.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carl.
Yep. And with that, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I love to help businesses. I love to talk. I tell everybody I'm a business owner as well as a technologist. So I try to keep the acronyms to a minimum. I try to keep the techie-ease out of the conversation and just try to help out. So again, thank you for your time and feel free to reach out.
Yep. So again, Carl, thanks for that presentation. That was great. You guys can reach us at heidentechnology.com. Also, you can reach us at 989-607-9121. And then also, Joseph, if you want to bring up your slide, I just want to let everyone know, we're a few minutes early, but I want to let everyone know that we will be sending the folks who registered, we will be sending them the PowerPoint presentation, the link to the video recording. We'll also send you a PDF, which is going to be a checklist for migrating your files to the cloud. And then we'll send you a link for both Carl and Joe in case you want to schedule a 15-minute completely free, no cost consultation with either both or one of those two guys. So did I forget anything, Carl, Joe?
I just pushed out the poll, so we're looking for input from you on what kind of topics you would like in future webinars. So you should see that poll. Just select. You can select as many as you want, but that'll give us some feedback on what we should be thinking about in the future.
And if there's something not in the poll that you would like us to cover on a webinar coming up, feel free to reply to that email we send you with all this information, and we can definitely work that in to one of our webinars in the future.
All right. All set. Thank you for attending.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you on Thursday.
All right. Bye now.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, there was a question in the chat from a Melissa. She had a question about collaborating with someone out at the organization. How do you give them permission to share their screen?
To share their screen. So normally it just works through Teams if you have the meeting and you're logged in with your credentials, they're logged in with their credentials. That screen sharing just normally works. On occasion, I run into issues where it doesn't work. I personally haven't worked through that problem myself yet.
Thanks. Do you think it has to do if they're on the online version or the desktop app?
No, there really isn't any difference between the versions, between the browser and between the desktop. The differences are minimal. What I've discovered is sometimes I have meetings scheduled, but I didn't schedule them with my account. I scheduled them with more of a office service account. And I run into issues there where I can't take control of someone else's desktop or they can't share their screen. But anytime I schedule a meeting with someone else, it normally works.
Okay. It looks like Melissa just said that she was wondering if it had something to do with firewalls. So Maybe.
That's very, very possible. Yes.
Yeah.
There's organizations that block teams.
When in doubt, blame IT.
Wait a minute.
Hey now.
Sorry, just
Wait a
kidding.
minute.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm still on the call.
Just kidding. Okay, thank you.
All right. Good stuff.
Thank you. This is great.
All right. Bye now.